Alrighty, we have a few people on the line, so we can go ahead and get started. I just wanted to kick things off and thank everybody for joining today's webinar, Improving Hiring and Retention Through IT Outsourcing. So before we get started, I'd like to just go through some housekeeping items. First off, everybody is muted and your video is off, but if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to use the chat feature or wait until the Q&A portion of the presentation and I can unmute you if you'd like. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to you afterwards. And lastly, if you have any follow-up questions after the webinar has ended, please feel free to email solutions@dyopaths.com with your questions. We will get them directed to the right person. So getting started, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Today we have two guest speakers. First off, we have Bob Turkic, Director of Talent at Renner Brown. Secondly, we have Oscar Basario, who is the IT Manager of End User Experience Operations at Royal Caribbean. And our DYOPATH panelist today is Jesse Alexander, Chief Revenue Officer. And from here, I'm going to hand it on over to you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate that. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. Hopefully today's topic will be a big interest to everybody and hopefully provide some information about how other companies from a staffing side, from an end user kind of company, how they're dealing with these challenges in recruiting and retention, and give you some, and we'll hopefully outfit you with some ways to deal with that, some ways to look at these challenges. So we'll be talking about our experiences in IT staffing. We'll be talking about some of the challenges, how to address those challenges, and how DYOPATH can help in this space for you. And we'll finish it up with some Q&A. So if we go to the next slide, please. First of all, I'd like to start off our webinar today with Bob Turk. And Bob is the co-founder of Renner Brown, a leading staffing and services company headquartered in New Jersey. We've worked with them for a number of years. He's got 3 decades of experience, primarily in the technology staffing area. But they're also, Renner Brown is also an Avanti elite partner. And you never know it, but Bob's a former football player and just tackles all the problems we have in staffing. So with that, Bob, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thanks, Jesse. Wasn't expecting that piece, but so yes. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Bob Turk. I'm actually excited to present today because the topic at hand, more IT jobs and qualified people to fill them, seems to be an ongoing conversation that we have on a daily basis nowadays with customers and candidates. Again, as Jesse had mentioned, I've been in the people business now for just shy of 30 years, having entered in 1993 as a technical recruiter, and shortly thereafter starting Renner Brown in 1995. I think one thing that's important to emphasize is our model at Renner Brown when we started was very unique to other staffing firms. For our first 3 or 4 years, we worked exclusively with the top MSPs in the country. That was a little bit different than the way that other staffing firms set up where they work directly with the customers. We found it much more beneficial to work directly with MSPs. So essentially the MSPs secured the customers, right? And they identified where your needs were from a staffing perspective. And behind the scenes, Renner Brown was the internal recruiting engine. So basically, they would identify the customers, we would identify the human capital. And it turned out to be a wonderful model. It really was a win-win-win for everyone, for us, for the MSPs, and most importantly, for the end customer. So kind of from my experience, if you're challenged with people, process, technology, or a combination of any of the three, I would say that the MSPs are really the trusted advisors when it comes to having high-level discussions with anything that may involve outsourcing or a co-sourcing model that you're thinking of. So I'm going to start with a story, and I always feel that my analogies are spot on. My kids would beg to differ and usually say that I hit the mark less than 50% of the time, but for the sake of giving it a shot, I'm going to start with a little story about my lawn right? And hopefully we can transition and it pertains to staffing and recruiting. So in March, I moved into a nice home, a new home, I should say. The only problem that we saw was the lawn and the landscaping. There was much to be desired with it, I should say. The lawn was brown. There was rot coming from my neighbor's side of it. It was full of weeds. There was crabgrass. Over the trees just weren't set up correctly. The bushes were terrible. So I knew that I had a challenge in front of me. Now, I don't necessarily have a green thumb, but there was work that I could have done myself. But I just knew that I had a plan, but unfortunately I didn't have the time to really execute it. So what I ended up doing is I brought in people that were really good at fixing lawns and landscaping. I started out with a buddy of mine that owns a sprinkler business. So he came in, installed a new sprinkler system, helped me out with the zones, the timing, the watering. So we kind of put together a plan of what the best practice would be for setting up the sprinklers. I then brought in someone to help with tree trimming, right? So with the trees, they were just overgrown. For the overall health of the tree, we needed to cut back the branches, and then I also needed to allow sunlight, to hit different parts of my lawn. I brought in True Green for chemicals. There were just disease and bugs that were taking over the lawn, and it was just something that needed to be fixed. And last but not least was an overall landscaper, right? This person was going to come in almost as the general contractor, put their arms around everything and kind of identify what was best for the health of the lawn and the landscaping. So the plan was taking shape. I knew it was going to take time. It wasn't going to be an immediate fix, right? But over a course of weeks, actually months, I ended up getting the lawn and the landscaping to the satisfaction where, my wife and I wanted it to be. So the part of the story that I wanted to tell, and this really is a true story, last week my neighbor came out and he just came over. He said, "Hey Bob, the lawn looks great. You really should play the lottery." I said, "Why is that?" And he says, "Well, you got lucky, I guess, at the end of the summer with the rain and the shade that you have." He says, "My lawn still looks the same. Yours looks much different." Now I just kind of gave him a thumbs up and laughed. And, I know that the rain and the shade only had a fraction, to do with it. Overall, it was because I had a plan, right? And I realized that I couldn't execute the plan without adequate help from people that could dedicate their time to 100% of the need and the plan that I wanted to execute. So hopefully it made sense, right? And if it doesn't, well, I apologize. But truthfully, it doesn't matter, if we're growing grass and talking about landscaping or recruiting and retention, right? Because overall, it's about asking yourself why you're doing something and what type of effort you're prepared to put into it to make it work. So 2 questions that I kind of pose for everyone on the call today is, how involved are you with your recruiting and retention process? And second, what type of effort are you and your organization willing to put into executing that plan? Jordan, if you go to the next slide. So challenges, right? Challenges are many when it comes to recruiting and retention. But one that I think is that 600-pound gorilla that we all have to identify is the Great Resignation is real. Okay, as an industry veteran of the IT staffing community, for us, data on employment trends is vital to understanding the market. And I promise you, I'm not going to bore you with too many statistics, but as a staffing firm in particular, we rely heavily on data and trends. So looking at a fairly large sample size of our own data, as well as combining that with reliable industry sources such as the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Gartner, the American Staffing Association, SHRM, CompTIA, the data supports the following statement from Tim Herbert, who's the CRO at CompTIA. And Tim says that the already tight labor market just became even tighter as competition for tech talent reaches near record levels. He goes on to say that for any employer, relying on the old hiring playbook, it's time to rethink approaches to recruiting and retention. And then also to add to that, per the U.S. Labor Bureau, the COVID pandemic has wreaked havoc on the U.S. labor market, right? So we know that there's a problem, right? The Great Resignation is here. It's just a matter of how we as employers are going to address that, or else it's going to continue. And people right now are saying that this could be another 2 to 3 years if we don't take action. Data on employment trends is again is vital. What I want to emphasize here is current unemployment numbers as of August are 3.7%, which is down drastically from 14.7%, I believe, as of April of 2020. Also important to point out is that the share of workers planning to leave their jobs remains unchanged from last year. So roughly about 40% of folks on your staff are looking for other opportunities to see what's out there. One of the things that I think is important to also mention is what's called the quit rate. The quit rate right now is 2.7%. I say right now, the most recent data is as of July. So retention is and is going to continue to be a challenge for employers of all sizes, right? Especially as we recover from quarantine and the effects of the pandemic. So couple that with really an antiquated recruiting model, and this increases the size and scope of the challenges that your team is going to face. We can move on to the next slide. So conversations that I have on a regular basis with customers of ours is that our customers must understand why, right? Why are employees happy? Why are employees unhappy? Why are people on your team currently looking for new roles or moving on to new companies? So pre and post-pandemic factors have really led us to this increased dissatisfaction among employees and leading to the increased quit rate that our economy is currently experiencing. So from our experience, we kind of break it down to traditional employees and non-traditional employees. Traditional employees are going to be more of your full-time employees, which makes up roughly about 60% of the overall talent pool. The traditional employees right now, the three major reasons that they have been looking are for compensation, career advancement, and an overall feeling of being disrespected by their current employers. Really, without an updated recruiting process, all we're doing right now is reshuffling that 60% of the existing talent pool, right? So ultimately, if these people are looking, but they're moving on to a different employer, the problem that really stems from this or is created from this is it creates wage inflation. And this really does not address the overall problem of why that employee was unhappy, right? So it just seems to be a constant reshuffling. Also, of that 60%, not to get into too many numbers here, 20% of those employees actually try to go back to their old employers, right? So either they're looking for some type of compensation or some type of job title that's going to bring them back. So again, it's a vicious cycle, but it really never addresses the overall problem. The second group, which I would say is makes up about roughly the remaining 40% of the talent pool, is what we would consider non-traditional employees. These non-traditional employees usually are more open to contract work, right to hire type work, or they're just freelance or independent consultants that have already put themselves in a place where they're flexible moving on to different roles. With those non-traditional folks, some of the main things that they're looking for, and I have a list, but then I'm going to emphasize really the top three, but the reason that they're looking are different than the traditional employees. The non-traditional people are looking for remote or hybrid work exclusively. They're looking for flexible hours that will help with child care. they're seeking meaningful work. Why are they doing the work that they're going to engage in? Other reasons are unhappiness with how their employer treated them during the pandemic, better alignment with kind of work-life balance. The overall culture of a company is very important to them. Health and mental health concerns. They rethink their careers. They want to rethink their long-term goals. Does this environment, is it going to get them where they want to go, at the end of the road? And then also, they want to have benefits, right? But that's not the top priority for them. So overall, the non-traditional employee is looking for flexibility, where the traditional employee was just looking for something, a better opportunity. Again, that's career advancement or compensation. So what do we do, right? Retention is probably one of the most important things here. With such a demand for workers, the Great Resignation is going to continue unless you as employers kind of address the factors I just mentioned. Implementing policies that emphasize flexibility in your culture is vital to retaining the key talent. So what can employers do to kind of increase this retention? And that's where I wanted to, again, emphasize really the top three that the non-traditional folks are looking for. The first is you have to address your 100% remote or hybrid policy. As a recruiter that speaks with hundreds of candidates a week, I can tell you that this is the number one thing that employees are now looking for, right? They want to have choices. According to a recent survey by CompTIA, from January through August of 2020, tech job postings where employers specified remote work or work from home as an option was up 50%, 56% over last year, and up 281% since pre-pandemic. These people are looking for jobs that offer flexibility on coming into the office. Remote roles are number one request from the non-traditional talent pool. And if 100% remote is not an option to your company, I would strongly emphasize consider some type of a hybrid with 2 or 3 days in office max, especially if you're located in a major city. And this is really coming from someone that commuted into New York City for 18 years, 5 days a week. Having the flexibility to offer remote or hybrid will likely build stronger relationships with your employees and overall reducing the chance of them looking elsewhere. The second part that should be addressed is having flexible work hours, right? These flexible work hours will really also help with childcare, which is one of the top concerns during quarantine and during the pandemic. So flexibility on hours allows for kind of it does allow for cost-effective measures and savings on childcare. I've read different articles where employers are trying to add on-site daycare, and in addition to having the on-site daycare, they'll also encourage parents that are there to be able to have lunch with their children. Not everyone's going to be able to have this type of flexibility, but putting something in there with the flexible hours and the possibility of on-site daycare, again, is something that could benefit an employer. Seeking meaningful work is something that your HR and talent team is going to have to really collaborate with the overall marketing of your culture. COVID has really changed the way people view their jobs. People now want to understand the meaning of why they are doing something. The pandemic really gave us all time to reflect on what is most important in our lives. Some people completely left the workforce. Others want to have an understanding of the work that they're doing has a purpose. They also want to work for organizations that have an identifiable social purpose. So again, working with marketing, working with your talent team, with HR, to kind of get the message out there so that when folks are looking to apply for jobs, they can see what type of values and see if it aligns with what they're looking for in their next role. On-the-job learning and development is also something that's going to help in your retention. Provide your employees with additional learning and development. I think that's critical. We speak with way too many folks that right now just say that it's kind of set it and forget it, where they're put in a role, they're in a cubicle, for the ones that are going back to the office, and there's really no additional learning and development. There's nothing that's exciting to advance kind of their career. Explain to them the importance of a project or a task. Don't just ask someone to do it. Collaboration and cross training will satisfy kind of the appetite for this group. Listen to your employees and their desires for their careers is really the first step to developing this lasting relationship with the folks. And then also, I think one that's obviously but often sadly overlooked is communication, right? Don't wait until it's too late to communicate. And that's conversations that we have with our customers way too often, that they only call us when something's wrong, whether it's with a contract or a contract employee or someone that we've placed. I'm a firm believer that it's more important to have the stay interviews, right? Have constant communication with team members. You can do it as a team, or you can do it on an individual basis. Don't be afraid to ask folks for feedback, right? Find out how they're doing. If they're permanent, give them updates on their performance. Emphasize the good, obviously, right? If you're dealing with contract employees, sometimes there may be a policy that there's only so much that you can discuss with them. Reach out to the agency. Again, be proactive. Don't be reactive. Let us know how the people are doing. People like to hear that their work is being recognized, right? Overall, people want to feel appreciated, and if not, they will consider leaving. So as more people quit and gain new opportunities and improve flexibility, it's going to become contagious, and more people will follow what they see their friends and colleagues doing. So really, in an effort to combat this, it starts with looking internally and taking an honest assessment and determining if you're actively pushing people away through older policies and processes. It's also time to create a culture that looks deep into what your employees desire, which is time, personal health, and family interaction over just the sheer money and power that usually your traditional employees are looking for. Employers are going to need to adopt policies that fit this new dynamic, or else they're going to keep losing talent to organizations that are meeting what these people are looking for. Jordan, if you can move on. There we go. So when it comes to recruiting, right, and I'm just going to touch upon this because I can get as deep and granular as we need to on the recruiting piece. This is a very competitive market. So your old recruiting strategies are no longer efficient, right? And this may be your HR or your internal talent team. You as hiring managers or directors may not have a say in how the recruiting and the attracting and recruiting policies work internally. But what I can tell you as a professional recruiter, just posting jobs to your website or job boards and hoping that the right candidates are going to apply, that's no longer your best strategy to attracting talent, especially in this market. Your internal recruiting team needs to take an aggressive approach. Attracting talent at the top of the funnel is always vital. So work with one suggestion is going to be work with agencies to broaden that talent pool, right? Again, keep feeding that funnel with talent. We have customers that implement fun and rewarding employee referral programs. And I've also seen an increase over the last 12 to 18 months, also promoting internally, right? So a higher rate of taking your employees and allowing them, after say possibly 12 months or so, to either move internally, move in your department, or even move to a whole another department. Years ago, it used to be, well, we train this person, we don't want to lose them. Instead of losing that person to another company, retain that great employee. Just give them a chance to cross-train or move on to another department. What we need to understand here and it's a conversation that I have on a daily basis, is that in the last 18 plus months, candidates are now in the driver's seat, right? We need to identify what is top of mind for the candidates that are looking, right? And many of them are the factors that I just mentioned, whether it's the traditional or non-traditional employees. But we need to understand as employers that they do have options. They're applying to job postings that emphasize flexibility and work culture. That is the key things that they're looking for when they're looking at these job postings. Now, when it comes to interviewing, right? I'm going to say don't rush, but move quickly on good candidates, right? Try to make your interview process 2 or 3 meetings at most, right? The days of, and I'm not exaggerating, 6 or 7 meetings when you can kind of collapse these into 2 or 3. You have to respect their time because it's moving quick, and you also have to try to get it down to 2 weeks or less, right? Unfortunately, June through August is in a recruiter's standpoint, is a terrible time for any type of interviews. We've had interviews that are now 5 weeks through the process, right? And the conversation that we have with customers is really an educational one, that we need to put an expiration stamp on good candidates, right? You must interview and you have to decide decisively, right? Make a decision, or else you're going to lose these people. It's okay to ask a candidate up front about their time frame, right? Many will disclose that they do have other options. The communication here is key, right? It's going to force your hand to make a timely and accurate decision. So if I could leave you with one thing, and then I'm going to kind of pass this over to Oscar, is overall, right? Companies must redefine their attraction and retention strategy. It's a necessity to build a value proposition that takes employers' whole lives into account. Delaying this will lead to burnout among existing employees, potentially leading to more attrition. So we do have a task at hand right now with the Great Resignation. So hopefully you can kind of put your arms around your existing retention and recruiting policy and have it work in your favor. That's my story, Jesse.
Bob, thanks so much. I appreciate that. I mean, those are great lessons, great stories, and great stats from the industry to address the recruiting and retention issues, as you see from a staffing point of view. I would like now to go talk, how companies are dealing with that, and I'll introduce you to Oscar in just a second. But just to reiterate, a big issue we've got here is with the tech shortage. The most recent Harvard Nash Digital Leadership Report said 67 respondents said that skill shortage, staff shortage, is preventing them from keeping pace with change. It's preventing them from going after the strategic initiatives, the revenue growth, the things that they're trying to do with their companies. And all these things we're talking about are doing that. So, Bob, you talked about the multi-pronged approach that we need to do to try to be more successful, to try to not just recruit the best talent, but also retain them is amazing. And Oscar Basario is the IT manager at Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, and has had to deal with this multi-pronged approach. And one way he did that is by working with some outsourced partners, which is part of what we're talking about here. So, Oscar, you've been IT manager and grown up within Royal Caribbean, been there over 2 decades. Seen a whole lot of phenomenal growth within Royal Caribbean, seen a lot of change in technology that you've had been part of and you've supported. So, despite the fact that we're all jealous you live in beautiful Miami and you love Cuban food, we'd love to hear from you some on this as well.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jesse, for, giving us the opportunity to share our experiences with our employee retention and making sure that we continue to focus on growth, right? So I will definitely share our story of how we've been able to combat these challenges that we've not only faced because of the pandemic, but even in the financial distress of the late 2000s. So working in the cruise line industry presents just many challenges, and we're really very sensitive to what the global economy is going, right? The economy is hurting our cruise line industry. It's going to be significantly hurt and impacted by it. So, overall, as we struggled to stay afloat during the financial crisis, we really had to get, really creative of how we're going to go ahead and continue to do business, reducing operational costs, and making sure that we do not impact our guest satisfaction rates and employee experience. So unfortunately, even during the financial crisis and even on the pandemic, we had to make some very difficult choices, but we also had to expand and get creative and work with, great partners like DYOPATH to be able to onboard employees in key areas that we use these managed services. Okay, so again, we needed to stay afloat on this, and we explore these different opportunities and how do we optimize everything, how do you optimize the employee experience, right? So we quickly learned that we will be able to reduce some of these costs. You probably want to go to the other slide. How we will be able to reduce the cost, the time consumption of trying to hire this talent quickly and efficiently. So working with DYOPATH, we were able to, be able to not really lose a beat, but just to continue our growth. Let me see here. I'm sorry, here I lost my train of thought here. All right, here we go. Yeah, so going back over to the pandemic, which what Bob alluded to, that's caused complete havoc throughout our industry. And being on the cruise line industry, it literally stopped our cash register. And with that being said, when the pandemic came around, we had to really, at a moment's notice, like many companies, that we had to go home, and which really drove our demand for technical support. And this is where scalability comes into place, right? Where we were able to work with, different outsourcing company, but specific with DYOPATH, that we were able to, downsize at one moment, but then quickly scale up at a moment's notice and have technicians available and ready to go with this skill set to be able to provide, our employees with support. So that's something that really helped us through these challenges. It's being able to, scale up, scale down, and having that flexibility. Okay. So that's what I got to say about that. And, one thing, we're going to move to the other slide, is the lessons learned from all of this, right? We worked with different outsourcing companies, and, not every single time is 100% perfect, but you build on this culture, you build on these relationships. And one thing that we really learned through these type of experiences is really cheaper is not, that doesn't get you the best. It's very important that when we work with these outsourcing companies in looking at what employees and talent pool that they're receiving, that they also match our culture, right? Culture goes a long way. One, to retaining employees, making sure that everybody is working together, that is satisfied, and that we think alike, right? Working with other outsourcing companies that we've worked with, sometimes don't match that culture set, right? But finding and identifying this company that has the same type of beliefs, same type of cultures, same type of work ethics, definitely goes a long way. So that's been my overall experience with what's going on and what's actively going on with employee retentions and hiring the talent pools.
Oscar, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing the experiences, the problems that you had that led to kind of how you decided to use outsourcing to help your staffing needs, right? I see posting by Royal Caribbean all the time to hire people, and you guys have gone with a multi-pronged approach. I see one of the things I think is really effective is from an internal point of view, your employees post about their experiences and their career progression, and and they always got the ship in the background also. So there's some great things that we can do when we're like Bob said, not focused on just traditional static, hey, posted, they will come, but a multi-pronged approach. And certainly one of those multi-pronged approaches is using a partner, right? The multi-pronged means you hire yourself, you hire contract people, you hire, remote versus on site. Also using a partner like DYOPATH to hire the skill sets needed, or better yet, not necessarily hire the skill, the people, but hire the functions and the skill sets so that you're looking for outcomes rather than I need two bodies. Hey, Bob, can you give me two bodies? Right? How can I help with the business? So Jordan, if you go to the next page there. So DYOPATH is a business that is a top 150 by the CRN. MSP and MSSP that were co-headquartered in Houston and Chicago through the result of a couple of different integrations and acquisitions that we've had. But with the 700 employees that we've got, we have got managed services, managed NOC, managed security and advisory services that cross all of the states of the union, providing 24/7 services that meet the needs that Oscar and other companies have got. We are very much HIPAA and SOC compliant because compliance is a huge issue for a lot of our customers. And if you go to the next slide, we also have a lot of experience working with the government and top secret. In fact, the advanced security services that we have are the kind of things that really help companies be more compliant, be more secure, not just with whatever the requirements are in their cybersecurity insurance requirements, but also as they try to be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, CMMC compliant, NIST, compliant, however that might be. In fact, we actually helped write some of the standards for the NERC SIP framework, which is the security around the infrastructure around energy sector. So we bring all of that to bear for our clients, which if you go to the next slide, please, really, this is the eye chart that shows all of the different functions and services that we help with our clients. It really boils down to managed IT services around service desk and on-site, managed NOC, around helping you with server, storage, network, whether it's cloud, whether it's on-premise, whether it's hybrid, right? And then the managed security around improving your security posture, preventing intrusion, identifying and detecting when there's an intrusion been happening, minimizing the impact, and helping just improve that posture, reduce the cost to your business, and providing the advisory services thereof. If you go to the next slide, really the things that make a difference for DYOPATH, how we can help you. It's that business first approach that Oscar said he really needs. How are we helping his business do better, grow and achieve their things? Second is helping mature the IT services, the stack of tools and processes you have so they become less chaotic and less reactive to being more compliant and predictive with the ability to continue to improve and address things that are necessary. So how do we get to the point where when there is turnover, which is the challenge we all have, that we've got documented processes and procedures that people actually follow, that are not just shelfware sitting somewhere that no one actually looks at. The best kind of documentation is the stuff that people use to perform their job, show their compliance, and learn how to do the new job that they're now doing. Go to the next slide, if you would, please. Ultimately, the thing that helps the Royal Caribbean and companies like Oscar's is that when you use an outsourcing partner like DYOPATH, what we can come in and do is help take care of the IT operations on a daily basis, all of those things that are below the waterline that allow us to that allow Oscar and his team to not have to worry about those anymore. They're getting done and they can focus on the things around security compliance and systems integration and improvements. They can get above the waterline and now work on the strategic things that improve their business and the results that technology allow Royal Caribbean or your company to achieve. Go to the next slide, if you would, please. So with that, as we take a look at, we're trying to address the talent shortage, and a huge way to do that is the things that we do internally, like Bob said, to improve retention. There's things that we can do improving our culture, our communication, the benefits, the flexibility we give our staff, and absolutely making each of our employees feel valued. But when when people leave, because they will, having a recruitment process that is multi-pronged that will allow us to use every avenue possible to meet the needs that we have as an organization, so we can address that Harvey Nash digital report that said the skill shortage is preventing companies from going after their strategic initiatives. We can help with that as well. So we really appreciate the time that you've had with us today to learn some more about these challenges, to hear from a staffing point of view, to hear from a specific company point of view with Royal Caribbean. And we'd love to now open the floor for questions. Jordan, are there any questions?
There are. Thank you, Jesse. So I've got a few for you guys. The first one that I had come in was, for my internal recruiting strategy, this is a waiting game and that's not working in this market. What does the staffing firm or MSP cover versus our internal recruiting team?
You want me to jump in that one?
Go ahead and take that. That'd be great.
Yeah. I'm going to say that the recruiting firms really work hand in hand with the MSPs as well, right? And I think the advantage that we have is that this is what we do every day. So again, putting at the top of the funnel, building relationships, right? So it's building the relationships and the chemistry with the candidates. So it's a different talent pool, right? Again, it's back to my conversation about traditional versus non-traditional. There's some folks that will just throw their resume at every single job and it may not be the right fit. Where recruiters and MSPs are different, we know the candidates. So the candidates that we're able to identify are also the ones that may be strategically the cultural fit for the employee's environment. So I think that's much different than the reactive approach where HR is just getting 500 resumes that respond to one particular job opening.
Thanks, Bob. So for the next question that I had come in, it states, how does bringing in an outside employee really help with my company culture or employee morale?
That's a great question there. Oscar, we've brought in a number of people into your organization. Have they been viewed as outsiders? How's that gone for you?
Well, I think over time, right, the initial perception is, oh my God, they're hiring other people. What am I going to do? Well, the way we communicate it is, you're going to be assigned what you're supposed to be doing, what your roles, right? We're going to liberate you from those tedious day-to-day tasks so you can focus on what we need you to focus on, the big picture, right? So that's the main driver on that, and that's what we communicate to employees here. And really, the feedback after times are like, okay, you know what? I don't have to do these chores that I have to do that takes me 2 to 3, 4 hours a day, right? We could offset that and have that company, focus on that piece so we could continue our path for growth, right? And it also helps that working with, for example, DYOPATH, they have access to this bigger talent pool. They have people that are literally almost ready to go from day one. That really has set this, momentum that they don't have to work on these tedious tasks. It's just very time consuming. And then we can just move forward and plow through the things that we need to plow through. So
Oscar,
that's where we see where the fit is at.
Oscar, you and Royal Caribbean made an intentional strategic decision to bring in outsourced labor to take care of key functions, what you did. And I think because you were intentional about making that decision and communicating that, that's part of what allowed them to us to come in and be viewed as partners and teammates, right? But but there, to the question, I think if companies use outsourcing partners to help their staffing issues, and they are not intentional in including these partners as team members, that's when we run into some of the downsides that I think the question referred to. Would you agree with that, Bob?
100%. Yes. It has to be incorporated into the culture, and there has to be policy that brings, that enforces a co-sourcing type strategy.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I've got one more question for y'all. And it says, what happens to my internal IT team if we also outsource some of our IT staff?
Yeah, that's a great question. We kind of addressed that with Oscar. You
Yep.
wonder, because it's a delineation of responsibilities. Go for it, Oscar.
Yeah, that's it. That's the key word there, that we were able to liberate them from those key tasks, so they can continue on what they need to be doing.
Right. Alrighty, well, that's all the questions that I have for right now. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to chat them in, or you can also send them to solutions@dyopath.com and we'll get them addressed. But before we wrap up for today, do you guys have any final statements that you'd like to leave everybody with?
Bob, how about you first?
The only thing I'd say again is take an active approach to your retention policy. However you were doing things pre-pandemic, you need to make some changes. And that also holds true for your recruiting strategy as well. So if you don't have that ironclad and you don't feel comfortable with it, then you have options. Like DYOPATH.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that one, Bob. That's awesome. Wonderful. And Oscar, how about yourself? Any closing statements there?
Closing statements, it's again, going back to the whole culture, as if you do go out and explore, other outsourcing, just culture is important, right? You need to understand what they're about, what they come from, and really, DYOPATH is really aligned with us, with the way we believe and the way we do things. So they've been a very good partner of ours, and we continue to have growth with them.
Well, thank you so much there, Oscar. That business first approach, trying to help Royal Caribbean succeed, is kind of the key of any partner relationship there.
Yeah.
Look, from a DYOPATH point of view, I want to thank both Bob and Oscar for participating on this panel, having this conversation to help provide some insights and some education. Certainly, DYOPATH is available to talk with anyone on how we can help them with their multi-pronged approach to help with, improving, your results from your IT stacks, from the challenges you've got to making your team more strategic. Everyone who attended here will get links to the recording here, and also how to get in touch with DYOPATH, with Renner Brown, and if you want to take some cruises, with Oscar there as well. So thank you for that. And Jordan, any final administrative?
Nope, just want again to thank everybody for joining today. As Jesse mentioned, the webinar recording and presentation will be sent out either later this afternoon or early tomorrow morning, as well as listed on our YouTube channel. And if you're interested in any other DYOPATH webinars or roundtables, or want to see what events we're attending, please visit the events page on our website and register. And that is all I have for today. Thank you again and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.